Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of Woke by Accident podcast. It is a weekly chat about socially conscious topics impacting the culture. On this episode of Woke by Accident podcast, we are joined by Larry Penton, host and creator of the Trigger Warning Talk podcast.
But to get the other three officers who were there to intervene, to get shows off this thing. And that sea of humanity can't just be the bystanders. It needs to be those that wear the badge, those that wear the uniform. If you want to have flags that say shirts, buttons, pendants that say back the blue, there has to be a reason that people want to back the blue. And if you don't give people the reason to want to back the blue, they're not going to do it.
Yo guys, this is Olufemi from the Sample Lounge, and you're listening to the Woke by Accident podcast.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Woke by Accident podcast. Today we have a special guest, Larry Penton, CEO of Penton Pending Consulting Solutions LLC. Larry's an expert on emergency operations, active violent incidents, and gun safety. And you may recall Larry was on our show previously on episode 92 where we discussed active shooter situations, and he is back to discuss the Tyree Nichols situation with me. He has a firsthand knowledge of the protocols of first responders, and so we're going to get into that discussion. And he is also the creator and host of the Trigger Warning Talk podcast. Welcome to the show, Larry.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be back. Ooh, we got a lot to deep dive into today.
For sure. Thank you for joining me today to discuss this matter about Tyree Nichols. We all have heard this horrible story out of Memphis about the killing and police incident involving the 29-year-old Tyree Nichols. And the video just was released following his passing on the incident occurred on January 7th actually, and he passed away 3 days later. Recently they've shared the video of the police officers beating him, which led to his injuries. Wanted to get your initial reaction to seeing that video that the world just saw recently here.
I want to begin by giving my condolences to the Nichols family, to his mom, his stepdad, his family, and that entire community in Memphis. Also, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, I have a very expansive view and definition of domestic violence. I believe that domestic violence occurs not just under your roof and between your four walls. I believe if you look at domestic violence and you separate the two words and put them together, domestic is wherever you domesticate yourself. We live in the United States. Those of us that live in the United States, we live in the United States. I'm in Charlotte. You're in my hometown of St. Louis, Missouri. You know, this incident happened in Memphis. And so when we see these breaking, and I get all of these breaking news stories as a active violent incident consultant, dealing with active shooters or whatever the mass casualty incident is. I remember when the story came out and I was just sitting there and I was just horrified because I'm like, here we go again. These acts that we see happen, they happen here in our home. I'm not from Memphis. You're not from Memphis. However, this is part of the U.S. This is part of our home. This is where we live. We live in this country. And we are bound by pretty much the same laws from state to state. If I commit an act of violence in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I go 4 miles south of where I live to South Carolina, the police are going to chase me over there, and it's going to not only be the Charlotte Mecklenburg Police Department, it's going to be the Mecklenburg County Sheriff's Office, it's going to be the Lancaster Sheriff's Office, the Lancaster County Sheriff's
Mm-hmm.
Office in South Carolina, because they work in tandem with each other. Because it's not like, oh, I'm in another state, y'all can't touch me. I didn't violate any laws in South Carolina. No, it doesn't matter. Well, I'm in the United States. I violated a domestic law
Right.
here in the States. So when we see these acts done by the cops, I add that to the expanded view of domestic violence because it has a very similar effect on us as we watch these things, not only from a law enforcement perspective, from a mental health perspective. And I've said it before, and I've told you on
Mm-hmm.
episode 92 when you interviewed me. Mental health crisis is the world's oldest continuous pandemic that's been around since the beginning of mankind. And until we deal with the stigmas, the taboos, the stereotypes, the trauma, the pain, the judgment, and all of those negativities, we're going to continue to see acts of violence happen, specifically in law enforcement. And
Mm-hmm.
we're going to continue to see people enabling law enforcement to do what they're doing. And we're going to talk about that because it was not just these 5 officers, or now there's they've expanded that to 7. 5 have been terminated, 2 are
Mm-hmm.
on administrative leave. Now they have 3 EMS workers that work for the Memphis Fire Department that have lost their jobs. And we'll get into those things. But again, I want to give my condolences to the entire Nichols family and that community because those individuals, they just lost their humanity.
Yeah, definitely. We've seen a lot of displays of police violence with civilians or what have you, and this one was just it's particularly brutal. It brings you back to the George Floyd moment. It brings you even going further back to Rodney King and beating, just not showing any care to another human being, and it was just really hard to watch that. I know a lot of people who decided not to watch it at all. Because of the effects of seeing this repeatedly, and being Black Americans, it is trauma to us.
I haven't watched the full video yet. And initially, I told my wife, they call her Mrs. LP. I haven't, I told her that I was not going to look at it. And I'm still kind of on the fence about that. From what I did watch, the clips that I have watched, that tells me a whole lot. And what we're going to talk about today is from a first responder's perspective, not
Mhm.
necessarily law enforcement. However, me being a firefighter and a paramedic, I'm retired, and I retired in 2020. I've been in EMS. I got into EMS in 2006 back in St. Louis.
Oh
I
wow, okay.
was born and raised, and I worked. I worked for a private EMS service in the St. Louis area, and I worked for a paid fire protection district in St. Louis County. And it was the largest fire department in St. Louis County. And so in 2020, I retired during the pandemic, the early months of the pandemic, and then we relocated to Charlotte. And so for me, I put myself in that situation. So when that call came out, and we were talking about this before we started recording, there's this thing called staging. And what staging
Hmm.
means is when a 911 call comes out to the emergency dispatch center or the emergency operations center, wherever you live, rural, urban, or suburban, that call gets taken by an emergency medical dispatcher, what most people call 911 operator. That 911 operator gets that information, they send it to all relevant parties. In this situation, they called for police. Police came, or actually, the police um, called EMS to come on the scene, but initially they did a traffic stop for Mr. Nichols, peace be upon his eternal soul forevermore, because they said he was reckless driving, air quotes.
Right.
So they pull him over. They have this encounter, and then it just goes south from that point. at some point they call for EMS. And so when EMS is called, they get suited and booted. They go to the scene, and what staging is typically is if there is an incident that is potentially violent or it is a violent situation, like they were fighting with him, fighting
Right.
him to get him subdued. Those situations typically, if we're not already there from the rip, they'll have a stage, which means we'll be 3 to 4 blocks away from where they are waiting on the all clear. And so this didn't happen because they called, EMS showed up, and this was the pumper, as we call it, the fire truck. Um, and so when the pumper showed up, you had 3 officials in on that pumper. You had a commanding officer, which was the lieutenant, which was a black woman. And then you had a male EMT, and then you had another male advanced EMT. So all paramedics are EMTs, but not all EMTs are paramedics because there's a tier system. You got your emergency medical dispatchers, emergency responders, EMTs, advanced EMTs, and then my level, which is the top, the EMT paramedic. And so the advanced EMT is trained like the EMT, but has more skills that they can do. They can start IVs, they can push some meds. They're not a full level paramedic, so they can't do everything that I can do as a paramedic, but they can do a lot of things. According to the news reports, the lieutenant stayed in the pumper. And normally whoever the commanding officer is on that truck rides shotgun. So she stayed in the pumper. The EMTs got out, and on the video, you can see them walking back and forth for a 5 to 6 minute period.
Before they start, taking
Before
their
they
equipment
started,
out or
right, before they started doing medical intervention. Now, every EMS service in the US and really worldwide, a lot of us work the same way. We are responsible for people that are hurt, injured, dying, and dead. Those 4 things. So you're going to hear another 4 that I want to bring up. I have to be the eye in that patient, and I have to be the eye in the hurricane of the patient's emergency, no matter what's going on. Even in a situation where there is an immediate danger, the only time that differs is in a active shooter or a violent critical incident like what happened in Uvalde, Texas, or what happened this past weekend with some of these shootings, or even what happened at the University of Idaho. Until that threat is neutralized, typically EMS will stay in the cold zone. So you got the hot zone where all the crap is happening. You have the warm zone just outside of that hot zone. And you'll have some officials and people there in the cold zone is where all the incident command staff and the public and EMS and your fire will be. In that hot zone, like in this situation, you had medical people and you had law enforcement right there. So these aren't tactical trained EMS folks as far as what the news reports are giving out. When they saw his condition, the onus is on you as the medical person. Your first responsibility is you, then your partner or partners, then the patient. You're okay. You're not in threat of being harmed. Your partner was okay. Your other partner was okay. Now it goes to the patient. You have to be that patient's advocate. And if you don't advocate for that patient, you are violating your oath that you taken. And it's called the Oath of Geneva. Some people call it the Hippocratic Oath. And this came out by the World Medical Association in 1948. And basically, and I'll read it to you. It says, I solemnly pledge myself to consecrate my life to the service of humanity. Remember that.
Okay.
I would give to my teachers the respect and gratitude that is their due. I will practice my profession with conscience and dignity. The health of my patient will be my first consideration. I will respect the secrets that are confided in me. So that's where they talk about HIPAA. I will maintain by all means in my power the honor and the noble traditions of the medical profession. My colleagues will be my brothers. I will not permit considerations of religion, nationality, race, party politics, or social standing to intervene between my duty and my patient. I will maintain the utmost respect for human life from the time of conception, even under threat. That's important. I will not make
Hmm.
use of my medical knowledge contrary to the laws of humanity. I make these promises solemnly, freely, and upon my honor. Um, it's the principle of first do no harm, or it's a Latin term called primum non nocere. And we have to take all of those things into account on every single call, regardless of race, creed, color, where you live, how much money you have or not. If you're homeless or you
Right.
live in a $1 billion mansion, it doesn't matter who you are. It's about you taking care of that patient or those patients' needs. First and foremost, once you make sure that the scene is safe and that you and your partner or partners are not in harm's way. They were
Right.
never told to not come and help. There's a thing also, so when we talk about negligence, so because they were fired for negligence, there's four components of negligence that have to be proven for a person who, like myself, is an EMS provider. So the first thing is there's a duty to act. When that 911 call comes out, you have a duty to act, to get suited and booted, go license sirens, or go en route to the call expeditiously. If you don't do that, that's one thing that you failed at. You can't be like, oh, well, this is a basic call. I see in the show notes they just got a splinter in their finger. We'll leave in about 5 minutes. No, you got to leave right then. Uh,
Right.
there's a breach of that duty. So, like I said, if you wait and put it off because it's not something that's critical, like a cardiac arrest or a house fire or something like that, you've reached that duty. The breach causes an effect. So, this would be a decompensation of the patient. Like they started to breathe a lot slower. Their vital signs
Hmm.
started to tank. They started to go into an unconscious state. Maybe they even went unresponsive, which is no pulse, no respirations. They need
Hmm.
CPR. And then that turns into a damage that has been inflicted by another person. That person is you because the onus is on you. So
Right.
all four of those components, now that has to be proven in court. You can still be fired for dereliction of duty, like they were. And so
Right.
it's important that EMS folks understand that you got to know the law. You got to know the law, and you got to know that you have a responsibility to intervene, even if it means that you're not going to be getting a warm, fuzzy feeling from those police officers. Your life
That's a
may
good
even
point.
be in danger, like what happened with George Floyd. Remember when they had the trial, or even before the trial, when the paramedics
Hmm.
came on the scene, the one medic, the lead medic that was in the back, that was going to be in the back with him, he literally told Derek Chauvin, get off of him and kind of pushed them off of him,
Hmm.
a little bit. He was very upset emotionally and mentally because he could never get George Floyd to respond to all the work
Yeah,
that they did trying to do CPR on him. And he showed that on the stand. And so, again, I don't have to know you, John Doe or Jane Doe patient. I got to treat you like a human being. And that's where they fail to act.
for sure. Like I'm looking at this NBC article that says the three personnel
Mhm.
were found to have violated multiple department policies and protocols. You were speaking to the protocol. You have your oath that
California
you
policies.
take
Yep.
when um, but that's a huge thing for them to have fired them so soon.
Yeah.
You think it was the delay? Because I've seen some articles that say, "Oh, they let him die, or was it just the hesitation? Where you think it's possible that they were intimidated by the officers and things like that, and that spoke to their hesitation?
I would say probably all of the above. And some things are just, unfortunately, some people, let me put it like this. Remember the movie Training Day with Denzel
Hmm.
and Ethan Hawke? You have this rookie cop who's a new detective, a rookie detective, getting ready to be trained by this seasoned senior officer. This guy showed him everything wrong that he should have been saying. All of these things that I'm showing you are really not what you want to do. I'm going to show you these things like, yeah, you can't drink on the job. I'll test you. I might test you here. You want to take the sip of this? Good. You didn't know. That's a good thing you said no, because you're not supposed to drink on the job. You want some of this PCP? Good. I'm glad you said no, because that's not what you're supposed to do. All of those things that he
Right.
was doing with him, it should
Yeah.
have been like, no, you don't do this, you don't do that, and all this stuff. Same thing with EMS and fire and police. There are things that you are taught in the academy, in the EMS, in your EMT classes or your paramedic school that are just big no's. And so, not only from your educational uh, your academics, but also when you get hired at a job, they give you two things. They give you, or three things. They give you an employee handbook. They give you a book that's called your clinical operating guidelines, and they give you your standard operating procedures.
Mm.
Your SOPs and your COGs are like, in your employee handbook are like a Bible for you. These are the things that you must know to do in these situations. Now, there are going to be some weird stuff that you may encounter. There are going to be some different things because we work in these austere conditions or whatever. However, it doesn't change those clinical operating guidelines, those standard operating procedures, and your employee handbook that you can keep in your ambulance. You can keep it on your person, because sometimes they'll have it
Hmm.
in a PDF form so you can just pull it up on your phone or whatever. So
Right.
I don't go for those excuses, because I've been in situations where I had to intervene in something that I didn't agree with that was going on with law enforcement and their interaction with a patient, where I had to step in and be like, oh, stop. No, don't do that, because I don't want my patient to be in a serious medical issue because you're about to go upside their head with a baton. Or, y'all getting too rough with this
Right.
person. Hey, stop. Like, I don't want to have to work on this patient more than I have to. I can deal with them having some bumps and bruises, but I don't want to have to start doing CPR on nobody if I can help So
Right.
when they came on the scene and they're kind of pacing back and forth, and they see this guy's an obvious medical need of attention, that's when they got to say, time out, hold on, stop the presses, whatever you got to. Hey, you know what? With respect, I need to check on him or her or them. Let me do
Right.
my job. You know, it's five of y'all, it's seven of y'all. They were saying that each one of those five officers got terminated. They weighed over 200 pounds. So you got 1,000 pounds of human
Mm.
working on suppressing a 150-pound human. He wasn't intoxicated. He wasn't on any psychoactive drugs. Like, he wasn't in what we call excited delirium syndrome. So somebody I heard or saw, they were saying, "Oh, he had this superhuman strength." Stop it. No.
Oh gosh.
We know when you see excited delirium syndrome, and for your viewers and your listeners, look up excited delirium syndrome, because this
Mm.
has something to do with another case that's going on right now, where a young man, Elijah McCain, was killed, and the three cops and the two paramedics are on trial for their lives in
Yes.
Colorado, because the medics came on the scene. They were called by EMS, called by the police, and they administered this drug called ketamine. Ketamine is a horse tranquilizer. We only use ketamine typically in three scenarios. It's starting to be used for a couple of other things, but mainly use it to intubate somebody or put them in a medically induced coma. They call it sedation
Mm-hmm.
assisted intubation. Pain management, if they're allergic to like a fentanyl or morphine, or they need something stronger than like a liquid ibuprofen med or something like that, or excited delirium syndrome, which is somebody being in this hyperactive state. Typically, they're high on some like upper, like a PCP or something like that. It may take 10 people to hold them down. They're very sweaty. They typically start stripping all their clothes off and all this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
They're talking and just kind of crazy, for lack of a better term. You know, excited delirium when you see it. And he was not that at all. And it's a weight-based drug. They gave him too much, according to the
Yeah, they sent him right into a coma, which
yeah.
led to his death.
So yeah, they're on the hook. They're on the hook
Definitely.
for that.
Yeah,
I
definitely.
just
Definitely.
there's another case also in Illinois where two medics are being charged with the death of a patient in their care, and all three of these cases are on camera.
Mm-hmm.
All three of
Mm-hmm.
them.
Mm-hmm.
These medics in Illinois, they were charged with they're facing murder charges after the patient died from, it's called positional asphyxiation, which means that they had this person in the prone position, lying face down, not supine, face up,
Mm-hmm.
prone position on the stretcher, and you can see them strapping them down real tight and like they in there.
Yeah.
EMS 101. You learn this the first day of class. You never, ever, ever, did I say never? You never, ever, ever lay a person prone on a stretcher. Ever. You can lay them on their side, which is
Mm-hmm.
left or right lateral. A lot of times we do that
Mm-hmm.
with women that are pregnant to keep the weight off of their vena cava, to keep them from getting a restriction of a blood flow. But you never lay a patient face down on the stretcher. Period. You don't hog tie them or none of that stuff. There's things that you learn from day one of class that you just don't do, and they just violated all of that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. And just very rough. There's video of the
Very rough.
exchange, and the even the woman was just particularly aggressive and rough with the patient. So
Yeah, yeah. It just puts a it puts such a negative stain on EMS. EMS is kind of considered the redheaded stepchild of first responders because
hmm
it's the newer of the three. When we are talking about EMS, and a lot of times we're all just lumped in together. We're all first responders, paramedics, fire, EMS,
yeah.
even the military is thrown in there. And so any negativity that happens, it makes people more cynical. I had a battalion chief that told me one time, "Hey, you all have picked a job that's literally trying to kill you every time you put on a uniform." I've been
Mm-hmm.
threatened by patients. I've
Mm-hmm.
gotten into near altercations with patients because you can defend yourself. You can meet, you can meet negativity with equal or lesser resistance. Like if
Okay.
somebody slapped me, I can't take my tough book and crack them over the head. You know what I
Right.
mean? Uh, so, but you can defend yourself, and there's a lot of laws now that cover us in terms of if somebody assaults us. There's a lot of
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
state and federal legislation that gives you some severe penalties for attacking a first responder. We just have to understand that our main job is to help people that are hurt, injured, dying, or dead. And we can't get caught up in, oh, well, this person is poor, this person is black, this person, we're on some power kick, we're in this elite unit. I heard a thing today where this comedian, he was saying, you got an elite unit for law enforcement. Why don't you have an elite unit that teaches how to be better humans?
Hmm.
So when the conversation about defunding the
Okay.
police comes up, I say to people, I think that term got misused and wasn't explained thoroughly by the people that initially came up with it. There are some people that feel like F the police. There's some
Mm-hmm.
people that feel like I don't let's just start over from scratch. I say to those people, you got to have law enforcement. Otherwise, you're going to live in anarchy. Nobody wants to live in anarchy.
Okay.
Trust
Yeah.
me.
Yeah, there's a
Nobody.
lot of people
Nobody.
that practice the what they call it, abolish. Yeah, they want to abolish
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
police and all that.
You don't want to. You don't want to live in anarchy. That's why a lot of people like being a United States citizen because we
Mm-hmm.
might have not might we got our problems here, but there's problems that are way worse in other parts of the world where the law enforcement you think is bad here. If you think law enforcement is bad here, go to some of these other countries in some of these other continents, or just Google
Yeah, yeah,
and you be
definitely.
like, yeah, I might want to change my mind. Now, that doesn't mean that people don't need to be retrained. That doesn't mean people
Mm-hmm.
don't need additional training. And so, what I do with my company, Penton Consulting Solutions LLC, is
Hmm.
I talk with other first responders. I talk to them about these, have these conversations with action plans. It's not just about dialogue. That's just trauma dumping. What do we do to prevent the next Tyree Nichols, the next
Hmm.
Orlando Castile, the next Breonna Taylor, the next, Botham John?
And even the matters with the school shootings and things like that. That definitely,
Same things.
yeah. Hmm.
Same things. So having these dialogues with coming up with action plans, my company, we created this crisis intervention team. And we're in the process of formulating that where we're going to go out nationally and talk to all these different first responder entities. I want to talk because I could go in. I was I'm from a family of cops. My dad
Okay.
used to be a police chief in one of the municipalities in St. Louis County. And
Okay.
so and his brothers, my uncles, are in law enforcement. And so I didn't go into law enforcement. He didn't want me to go in law enforcement, but I used to work for them doing their tech support before I got into EMS. And
Mm.
so I'm still part of that fraternity. And so I can talk to those cops. I can talk to the EMS workers. I can talk to the fire department officials because I know the lingo, I know the words, I know the language, I know the culture. I got the credentials. I can go in and say, hey, been there, done that. Here's why you don't want to do this. Here's why you should do more of this. Here's why you should do less of this. We don't have to defund the police. We can take those funds that are already allocated and say, hey, let's put more of this money in the budget already to mental health, to having more community paramedics come out and do, because a lot of times people use EMS for their personal or their primary care providers. And so
Hmm.
when we see situations like what happened, even in this situation, he didn't violate from what the cameras, all the body cams and the cams in the area picked up any reckless driving. Maybe he was having a mental health issue because he was being
Hmm.
accosted by these officers. And from the rip, like they said, they gave him 71 commands in 13 minutes. There have been a number of cases where people have died and gotten
Mm.
shot by the cops because they were in their house. All they know is they hear all this noise outside, or they see all these lights and sirens and stuff, and they open the door to figure out what's going on. And you got all these people yelling all these commands: SWAT, cops, other law enforcement officers. There's never one. There should be one person giving the commands. One.
Right.
You can have everybody and their mama there, but there should be one spokesperson giving the commands. Because if you got two more, who do I follow?
That's why it's like, what was
Because
really going on here? Yeah.
who do you follow? Who do you
Right.
follow? That's what makes it hard. And if you're telling me to lay down and I'm already on the ground, like I mean, the lowest I can get is under the dirt. You know,
Right. I
if you're
mean, he
telling
was
me
he
that,
not even read his rights or anything. That's why I understand that kidnapping charge because it's almost like he's being held against his will. You're not reading me his rights. He's just being held.
yeah, and the Supreme Court has very specific rules about reading the Miranda rights. Like you're not even supposed to
Definitely.
memorize them. You're supposed to take out your card with the Miranda rights on them and read them to the person that you're taking into custody.
Hmm.
And you can read that person their Miranda rights. They don't even have to be in cuffs. You can read those rights to them as you're putting the cuffs on or whatever. You know, you don't have to wait until they're already in the cuffs or what have you. You just have to read them their rights. Um, Now it's different. I mean, you can't really read them their rights if they're unconscious or unresponsive because you got to ask them, do you understand these rights? And so when they were trying to sit him up and he kept slumping, they set him up again. Like after that first slump, we ain't got nothing else to talk about. Let's load
Yeah.
and go. Load
Right.
them on a stretcher, put them in the ambulance. You need to be going licensed sirens to the next appropriate medical facility.
Yeah.
Period. Point blank.
It's like, was any protocol followed at all from the officers to the EMS? I mean, I know, you said that you come from a family of police, but you can acknowledge that there is a problem with
Yes.
policing, right?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
And I'll tell you this: being black does not preclude you from doing crimes. Just like being white or non-melon. When it comes to crime, anybody can get it and anybody can give it. And
Mm-hmm.
I'll say it again: when it comes to crime, anybody can get it and anybody can give it. Has nothing to do with anything other than a human deciding to do a crime for whatever reason it is. And the more people that want to join in on that, whether they wear a badge, whether they or not, it doesn't matter. A
Yeah.
crime or crimes were committed. The onus is on the people that have taken an oath, like I read to you earlier,
Mm-hmm.
and raised their right hand and said that particular oath that they are going to make that person in their custody, whether it's your patient or your alleged perpetrator, you have their health as your main priority, no matter what law you have accused them of breaking. We have seen people that have done mass casualty shootings, like Dylan Roof, when he
Mm-hmm.
went and shot all those 9 people in that church in the South, and he got arrested without being shot, without being tased, without being pepper sprayed, without being pounced upon by one, not two, not three, not four, not five, not six, not seven officers. They even took him to Burger King to get some food on the
Right.
way to the jail.
Yeah.
So,
So how do
it's a
we?
whole different kind. And he
Yeah.
was and he was armed. He was armed. He
Right.
just killed
Right.
9 people.
Yeah.
So, you know, I know every situation is different, but at the end of the day, the pursuit of life, liberty, and happiness is part of the Constitution. We have to honor life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Everybody should go home at the end of the day, even if you got to take a minor stop to jail
Mm-hmm.
for an alleged crime. Everybody should go home at the end of these events. And we know that's not going to happen in every single case because of whatever circumstances or whatever. But we're not talking about those. We're talking about these situations with these unarmed folks that obviously didn't commit the crimes that they were accused of. And even if
Right.
they did, even if he did this reckless driving, there's no evidence to the fact. And even if there was evidence to the fact, it does not justify them beating the crap out of this man to the point where he
Right.
was unconscious and he ended up dying 3 days after being in the hospital on a ventilator. It just doesn't justify it. There's nothing that they can tell me from what I saw and from what I know that I would be like, great job, Thumbs up. I do the same thing
Right.
if I were you guys. None of them, not the
Yeah.
fire department, and definitely not those officers. And shame on them, all of them. Shame
Yeah,
on
for
them for
sure.
not treating him like a human being.
For sure. Recently, they've a new narrative, which hasn't been substantiated, so we won't, spend a lot
Sure.
of time on that, but just a narrative, a possible narrative that maybe, you know, he was targeted. One of the officers, there's a narrative going on the internet that there was an affair with an ex and that he knew exactly who Tyree Nichols was and he, kind of singled him out and, and that's why they went so rough with him because it was a personal kind of dispute being aired out.
You
So,
know what? Whether it was a personal dispute or professional disputes, you know what those
mhm,
disputes are supposed to get dealt with? In court. That's why we
okay,
have court, folks. That's what the courts are for. The lady on the statue
true.
with the blindfold on, with the scales in her hand and the sword in the other hand. That's what the courts are
Lady
supposed to be.
Justice.
Lady Justice. That's what the courts are supposed to be for.
Right.
And let me backtrack. I want to say something because I do have to say this. They are innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. All parties. They are
Mhm,
innocent until proven
mhm,
guilty in a court of law.
true.
I'll just leave it at that.
Okay. No, I understand that. But yeah, I mean, it was just really bizarre that they went so rough with it. So this new narrative, this potential narrative, could be it could be real, and people like to, have vendettas and things like that, and they want to get even or they want to, get back or unleash, you know.
Remember with the George Floyd case, they were saying that Chauvin and Floyd, peace be upon his eternal soul forevermore, knew each other. Like they worked somewhere before, doing security or something like that, and they had a problem with each
There was a
other.
prior, yeah,
Yes,
encounter.
yeah. And so, I mean, even if that's the case, what does that have to do with the price of tea in China? Like you have to judge each case on its individual merit. If you saw that this person was recklessly driving, okay, you got a few options available to you. You can follow him, get the plate, you can pull him over, you can write a ticket because police chases are being frowned upon more and more, and there's actually
They
a lot of
are. They are.
laws and rules that say stop it at a certain point. Some municipalities have a no chase policy now. If you can, if you can get them to pull over, great. If not, hopefully you got some good information from the license plate or the make of the car and all this stuff, and we'll take it from there. It's not worth. Nobody wants to be part of the breaking news. Not on some negative stuff like that. If I delivered
Right.
a baby that was in a burning building or something like that, yeah, that's some great breaking news. I don't want to be part of. I would hate to be one of those three Memphis Fire Department officials that got fired because I decided not to. I violated my duty to act. Now,
Hmm.
it doesn't mean that he would not have died. He may still have died, but we'll
Okay.
never know. We'll never know because they did not act
Right.
accordingly. That's the problem.
Exactly. Yeah, the fact that they were not professional and do their job just I hate that part because and even this officer, if this was a personal, riff and then he's dragged these other officers into it, if this is the case, and ruin all of their, careers and lives for something that's
Yeah.
not worth it. But they'll be able to tell because part of the rumor mill is that he took a picture of Nichols, and sent it to the woman. Is that's part of the narrative, and they're going to be able to tell if that's the case. I mean, that's probably
Yeah,
going to
it's gonna
be
be
like
Yeah,
courtroom
that's gonna be real interesting to see
and
how
stuff.
this
Yeah,
tangled web is woven. Who all has
yeah,
a part to play in this? And I'm not saying that that's justification for what happened. I'm just interested to
no,
see
mhm,
how widespread this web is going to be in terms of these interpersonal connections that are
mhm,
coming out in these news reports. The other thing that I think is important is that the police chief in Memphis. Two things.
mhm,
I think it's great that the police chief and the DA in Memphis took a quick stand. And like Attorney Ben Crump said, this should be the blueprint on how police investigations are done from the date that it started till 20 days later. These officers have been fired and charged. We have seen where it's been 2 years, 6 months, and they're still investigating stuff or whatever. That's insane.
oh yeah,
It don't take that long,
yeah,
especially with these cameras and all this
correct.
stuff or whatever. I agree with him
Yeah,
100%. This can be a blueprint. It shouldn't take longer than 20 days. And if you can do it in a shorter time, so be it. Nobody can say to me to make me feel like, oh, yeah, I need another 6 months. You need another year. You need another 2 years to investigate this. No, nope, nope. And if your department doesn't have cameras on them in terms of body cams, because they were covering up some of their body cams while they were giving these commands, that's the other thing.
mm,
And see, trying to be slick.
okay,
It's like, stop. You're
yeah,
trying to be slick and get over like people are just dumb. You got to answer for that stuff or whatever. Thank goodness that they had cameras in the area also. There's not really too many places you can go that
right,
you're not on camera. So
right,
I applaud the chief and the DA's efforts. I will say this: there have been complaints against that Scorpion unit before this incident happened, and
mhm,
Scorpion stands for Street Crime Operations to Restore Peace in Our Neighborhoods. Some people have an issue with that name because why would you use a violent animal or insect and think that they're going to
okay,
be nice and kind and courteous and all this stuff? They could have named that unit Umfufu.
oh,
Don't matter. What
okay,
the name is the culture
yeah.
and the training. That's what they could have named that unit Baby Shark or Barney. Don't matter what you name it. It matters how they are trained and
And
what
it's
type of
interesting. It's
autonomy
supposed
they
to
have.
be, yeah. So this unit is supposed to be so elite, but these guys didn't have a whole lot of experience, and some of them even had a arm length of complaints, and they still made it to this elite unit. You
I
know,
know in Memphis they got a big crime problem, just like a lot of our major cities. And
yeah.
so, yes, you do need to deal with those crime issues. Having more police officers on the street is not necessarily a deterrent. We've seen that. We've seen places where they got a lot of cops, and maybe that helps in that particular neighborhood. I live in South Charlotte. I live in a very affluent neighborhood. There's a police station probably almost 3 minutes from where I live, if that. In Charlotte, you don't see a lot of cops riding around and rolling around like you see in St. Louis. It's not that they don't have them, because Charlotte is almost 900,000 in population. The city and the county merge. So imagine in St. Louis, if St. Louis City and St. Louis County, which is 91 municipalities, were all one entity. That's how Charlotte is. Um, but you don't see law enforcement moving the way and doing some of the things. And they have their own issues, but you don't see the presence like you see in some of these other cities. We have crime here. It ain't on the level of like in St. Louis or maybe even in Memphis, but crime is anywhere. So having more cops to help, yes, that's a great thing. But it's not necessarily a deterrent. What's a deterrent is what causes crime. What are some of the reasons that criminals are doing crime? A lot of it has to do with poverty. A lot of it has to do with systemic racism. A lot of it has to do with classism. A lot of it has to do with environmental
Mm-hmm.
things. And when I say environmental things, if you live in a hovel,
Mm-hmm.
if you live in a hole in the wall, you're not going to care about your community as much. And if you don't care about your community as much, you tend to not do things that are law abiding. There's a number of break ins
Mm-hmm.
that we're dealing with in the Charlotte area. Burglaries and different things are on the rise. You know,
Mm.
there's a number of different crimes that are on the rise, including violent crimes. And so, having more you can have a cop on every block. That does not mean that crime is going to stop. I don't care what city you're in.
Yeah.
You know, we don't want to live in a police state either. You know, again, you want to have law enforcement because if you don't have that, you're going to have anarchy. However, we have to do better with our interactions with the cops. First of all, they got to do better with
Mm-hmm.
us. And that oath
Yeah.
that they take in the police academy upon graduation, it means the world. And here's why, real quick. If I, as a black man, get pulled over here in Charlotte, and this is happened, I've only been pulled over one time since I've been here. And I got pulled over,
Mm.
and it was at night because it's almost 8:30 here in Charlotte. I got pulled over at night going to pick up my daughter from work. I got pulled over because one of my tail lights, my license plate lights were out. I had all my required documentation. I had my license, I had my registration, I had my insurance, everything was valid. That interaction was probably less than 2 minutes from start to finish. There were other cops that ended up showing up on the scene also. I never was asked to get out the car. I never was spoken to disrespectfully. This was a white officer. There was a Hispanic
Mm-hmm.
or Latinx or Latino officer that showed up also. I never saw that person at my car. They were in their car just giving support. It was a very pleasant interaction with the officer. I had on, it was, this was last year, so it was chilly outside. So I had on my fire hat. And he was like, "Oh, you work for the Charlotte Fire?" I was like, "No, I had just moved here from St. Louis, so I had some of my stuff in the car or whatever." And I was able to leave that scene in that situation with just a warning. Hey, go ahead and get your light issue fixed. I didn't get a ticket. I didn't get a citation or none of that stuff. That could have been different if that police officer had a different mentality. It could have
True.
been a totally different, even though I'm a first responder. Because I've been pulled over in St. Louis before by a non-melanated officer, and it went totally different. I've had experience with my
Were you
kids.
nervous at all during this?
Absolutely.
Okay, that's what
I
I
was
was
nervous when he
wondering.
put his hand on his firearm. I was mad before then because,
Mm.
and full disclosure, I was speeding. I got
Okay.
to, I was going to work. I was running late, and I had to make one of my last two turns was at a stop sign. When I got to the stop sign, you know how in St. Louis we do those rolling stops. I did a rolling stop and turned the corner. I didn't see the cop there, and so I pulled into.
Okay.
Don't laugh. Look, don't. So I pulled into my job, and I was doing. I had to work at the EMS job. I pull in, I park, and this guy parks right behind my car because I pulled
Oh
in.
wow.
So I'm faced in. He pulls in right behind me, turns his lights on and all this stuff. And he was like, "Stand," because I was trying to get out the car or whatever. Well, I got out the car. He told me to get back in. And I was
Mm.
like, what happened? Or whatever. He was like, "You didn't see me right there and all this stuff when you ran that stop sign." And I
Oh.
was like, "Oh, I apologize for not seeing you." I said, "My bad, I'm running late. I'm just, you know," and it went down here from that point because he's yelling all these things at me or whatever. I get back in the car. I was like, "Okay, man, hey, can I ain't going nowhere. Like, first of all, I'm at work. You got me blocked in, so I can't leave. I'm not a felon or none of that stuff or whatever." Um,
Mm.
and it went from bad to worse because now he's treating me like I'm a perp or whatever. He ran my name and he was like, "Oh, I see you got all this stuff," and I was like, "I ain't got nothing on me. What are you talking about?" It was my son. He had a couple of traffic issues going on, and he's junior, my oldest son or whatever. I said, "What's the birthday?" And he gave it to. I was like, "That's my birthday. That's my son. He's junior, whatever." But then, so now people are starting to come outside. And so we're going into this back and forth because he won't let me go inside. I'm like, just give me the ticket, man. Like, what's the problem? You need to stay in the car, whatever. Puts his hand on his sidearm. This is a training gun that I showed you in the last interview you did.
Yes.
Had his hand on the sidearm. I'm like, wait, why are you putting your hand on your gun? Like, you about to draw down on me? This is exactly what I said to him. You about to draw down on me? Here? Right now? In front of like 30 people? So everybody's like, please just stop talking. Just don't say nothing else and all that. And one of my co-workers, he's a EMT, but he works for he's a state detective. He's like, Larry, don't say nothing else. Let this ignorant MF give you a ticket. He was kind of whispering, and let this ignorant MF go ahead and give you the ticket. I said, I've been waiting on it. Like, I don't know what he's waiting on. He's trying to find all kind of dirt on me, and he's not finding nothing. So that's frustrating. So anyway, I didn't say nothing else. I kind of did my right to remain silent. So I'm sitting in the car, got my hands on the steering wheel and all this stuff. He comes over to the car, and he gives me the ticket, and he's trying to tell me all this stuff about what I need to do. And like, I don't know this or whatever. I take the ticket. You understand? Yes, I understand. Thank you. Goodbye. Can I get out of my car now that I got the ticket? Yes, you can. And I get out the ticket. But I'm shook now because now I'm pissed. And this dude put his hand on his sidearm like he was about to draw down on me. What if I was at work in front of 30 people? And I'm in uniform. I'm in full uniform. I got my EMS stuff. Yeah. That could have went all kind of ways if we were somewhere out of sight, nowhere, nobody around, and all that stuff or whatever. What if he had called backup? He already on 10. You're at a 10. I need you at a 2. So I understand sometimes why people run in these situations, because if you're in fear of your life, whether it's the police or it's a bear or a dog, you're going to run. So I understand when people in these situations have run, because you see too many of these stories. I'd rather take my chances running than dying on my knees or on my stomach.
So what is the proper ways that people should react?
I learned a long time ago, and this was in St. Louis, that when it comes to encounters with the cops, you be as compliant as you can be, because the streets are not the courts. Have your day in court if you can do it. You don't have to say sir and ma'am. Yes, it's good enough. No, it's good enough. You can be respectful and say yes. You can be respectful and say no. You can be respectful and not say anything. You have the right to remain silent, even if they don't read you your Miranda rights. Am I going to be ticketed? And if so, what do you need from me to facilitate this ticket exchange? Have all your stuff in order. Have a valid license. Have a valid registration. Have valid insurance. Those 3 things right there can minimize other things from happening, because the less that you have that you need, now they start looking for stuff. Now it exacerbates the energy. You can be as compliant as you want to, but if you don't have all the stuff that you're supposed to have, that might cause somebody to have a wild hair up their butt. The streets are not the courts. And so the best way to deal with it is to just be compliant. Hey, if you're going to give me a ticket, I don't have to like it. I'm not going to argue with you about it either. What are you giving me a ticket for? You don't have to admit that you knew something or that you did something or whatever. You're going to give me a ticket. Okay, what do you need from me? What do you need me to do? Do I have to sign something to be released, or can I just get the ticket and leave? Like they used to take your driver's license to make sure you came to court. They stopped doing that.
Yeah.
You know, they're gonna give you a warrant. If you don't show up, they're gonna give you a warrant regardless. So it don't matter or whatever. But yeah, you know, you just do your part. A lawyer is only as good as their client, folks, in civil court and in
Mm.
criminal court. A lawyer is only as good as their client. You may not be able to prevent somebody from being a butt. If you feel like your rights are being violated, you can always ask for a superior officer, a senior officer. You ask
Okay.
for it a couple times, and they're supposed to bring one on the scene. I don't know which of those officers was the senior officer. I
Mm-hmm.
didn't see a sergeant come on the scene, but you don't have to be a sergeant to be a senior officer. You can be a corporal or whatever. That didn't happen, and so you just have to say, okay, hey, if you're gonna take me in, go ahead. You want my hands in front? You want my hands in back? Where you want? What do you want me to do? Because I don't want to give you any thought that I'm resisting. Hands up, hands out, hands behind. I wouldn't even put my hands behind because that might look like you're reaching for something. You want to take? Am
Mm-hmm.
I under arrest? Yes. I want to incur my right to remain silent. What do you want me to do? I'm not going to move until you tell me to move. If they tell you to lay down, go ahead.
Mm-hmm.
You might not like it. It might be, make you feel less of a man or a woman or whatever. But again, you want your day in court, not your day in the morgue.
For sure. Any other thoughts on? I appreciate you sharing about the protocol from first responder perspective. That definitely gives some additional insight to from an EMS paramedic. That whole first responder team that shows up in all of these different incidents.
In the George Floyd case, in closing, one of the
Hmm.
things that was brought up in the trial was there was a beautiful sea of humanity. All of those bystanders that were filming and talking to
Yes.
those officers to attempt to get Chauvin to get not only his knee off of Floyd's neck, but to get the other three officers who were there to intervene to get
Hmm.
Chauvin's knee off of his neck. And that sea of humanity can't just be the bystanders. It needs to be those that wear the badge, those that wear the uniform. If you want to have flags that say in shirts and buttons and pendants that say back the blue, there has to be a reason that people want to back the blue. And if you don't give people the reason to want to back the blue, they're not going to do it. They're not going to do
Right.
it. It's not going to happen. I got one thing that I want to show you real quick in closing.
Hmm.
My wife gave me this plaque. She gave it to me a couple of years ago. It has the EMS, and it says, "Not all superheroes wear a cape." Those 7 officers and those 3 former employees of the Memphis Fire Department, they failed to be the superhero in the case of Tyree Nichols. You don't have to be in a Marvel or DC comic to be a superhero. You have a duty and a responsibility as a sworn, licensed, certified professional to make sure that anybody in your care is able to walk away from this situation with little to
Hmm.
no harm, physically, mentally, emotionally, and all of the above. And if you don't do that, this ain't worth the wood that was cut from the tree. Help you out.
For sure. Well, thank you, Mr. Penton, for sharing, and thank you for your service. You're welcome here anytime. I appreciate it so much.
2 for
And I
2.
will share for sure. So we'll share your links. He has a podcast, guys. Trigger warning.
Yep. Trigger Warning Talk
Warning.
podcast every Thursday, streaming on all platforms. And you can watch the interviews on Spotify or our YouTube channel, which is Penton Pending Consulting Solutions LLC. Every Thursday, new episode.
Excellent. Okay, so we'll have all that listed. We thank you guys for listening and take care. At this time, we're going to go ahead and conclude the episode. We greatly appreciate you listening. We invite you to follow us on social media. On Instagram, it is Woke by Accident Podcast. On Twitter, it is Woke by. On Facebook, it is Woke by Accident Podcast. We also have the new website up, www.wokebyaccident.net. Please check us out. And also follow us on all of your favorite streaming platforms. And please leave a review and share feedback. You can also reach out by Gmail, wokebyaccident@gmail.com. And every time you listen, we appreciate it so much. Thank you for listening and take care.